Hey everybody, I have a video here for you today, but before I start, just want to mention a few things. Thanks to the people who have sent me some emails, some really good subjects for my Q&A video coming up. Also, my video last night, the Pyramid on Mars, well, I enjoyed reading some of the comments and I knew they would be all over the place, but the main storyline was I have over 1,500 videos, hundreds and hundreds of hours on stories of stuff on this planet, and I spent 45 seconds making videos about stuff on Mars. So take for whatever you want from that video. But getting back to the story today, this is physics.org, and I saved this about a week ago. I just thought this was interesting, and I have some time today, but I'm just sitting around on Saturday, and my left foot is swollen, and I'm not happy about it. But it says here, who were the mysterious Neolithic people that enabled the rise of ancient Egypt? Here's what we've learned on our digs. And this comes from Joel Irish. He wrote this story. But I just found what was written here pretty interesting. It says, to many, ancient Egypt is synonymous with the pharaohs and pyramids of the dynastic period starting about 3,100 BC. Yet long before that, about 9,300 to 4,000 BC, enigmatic Neolithic people flourished. But that date, 9,300 BC, is pretty much the date I come up with in my Dendera Decoded video, where I state this is the time that the place we call Egypt today emerged out of, this exact same period. And I mentioned that in a recent video also, coming from a whole different other place in the world. It says, indeed, it was the lifestyles and cultural innovations of these people that provided the very foundation for the advanced civilizations to come. But it says, who were they? As it turns out, they haven't actually been studied much, at least relative to their successors, but our excavations at 6 burial sites, with some of the analysis recently published, have now provided important insights into their mysterious ways of life. One reason why we know so little about the Neolithic Egypt is that the sites are often inaccessible, lying beneath the Nile's former floodplain or outlying deserts, and that makes sense with some ancient sites that are buried that we have found. With permission from Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities, we members of the combined prehistoric expedition explored Neolithic sites in Egypt's western desert. The sites we currently are excavating lie along the former shores of an extinct seasonal lake near a place called Gebel, Ramlah. That is on the map there. It says, though not lush, the Neolithic was wetter than today, which allowed these ancient herders to populate what is now the middle of nowhere. We focus on the final Neolithic phase, which is 4,600 to 4,000 BC, which was built on the success of the late Neolithic, and that is 5,500 to 4,600 BC, with domesticated cattle and goats, wild plant processing, and cattle burials. These people also made apparent megaliths, shrines, and even calendar circles, which look a bit like a mini Stonehenge, and I'm sure they're referring to a site like Napta Playa, or maybe Napta Playa itself. And if you're not familiar with that, I will leave a link below. But certainly 7,500 years ago, this Predynastic period, as stated earlier in this video, is not studied very much by Egyptologists, though they do recognize it in a vague, general kind of way. But what we have found recently and what is still being uncovered, it seems like 7,000 years ago, the whole Nile Valley was populated and people were erecting shrines and monuments and carrying on what seems like an earlier traditions in way they symbolized and memorialized the afterlife. It says during the final part of the Neolithic period, people started burying the dead in formal cemeteries. Skeletons provide critical information because they are from once living people who interacted with the cultural and physical environments. Health, relationships, diet, even psychological experience can leave telltale signs on teeth and bone. In 2001, 2003, we excavated 3 cemeteries from this era. The first in the western desert, where we uncovered and studied 68 skeletons. The graves were full of artifacts with ornamental pottery, seashells, stone, and ostrich eggshell jewelry. We also discovered carved mica and animal remains, as well as elaborate cosmetic tools for women and stone weapons for men. So it seems the way the dynastic Egyptians buried people evolved from a much earlier period, from the Neolithic period, and it's being studied right here. We learned that these people enjoyed low childhood mortality, tall stature, and long life. Tall stature. Men averaged 170 centimeters, while women were about 160 centimeters. Most men and women lived beyond 40 years, with some into their 50s, a long time in those days. Strangely, in 2009 to 2016, we dug 2 more cemeteries that were very different. After analyzing another 130 skeletons, we discovered that few artifacts accompanied them, and that they suffered from higher childhood mortality as well as shorter lives in stature. We're talking several centimeters shorter and perhaps 10 years younger for both adults and both sexes. But I just find that kind of strange and interesting. Does that reflect something bad going on Earth, or just a change from the initial culture who came here and started this around 9000 BC? A lot of questions. Astonishingly, the largest of these 2 cemeteries had a separate burial area for children under 3 years of age, mostly infants, including late-term fetuses. 3 women buried with infants also were found, so perhaps they died in childbirth. In fact, this is the world's earliest known infant cemetery. So what can this tell us about these people, let alone their descendants? As it turns out, a lot we can use the findings to make interpretation about gender, life stage, well-being, status, and other things. For example, why there was such differences between 2 grave sites. They could have been separate populations, but it is unlikely based on overall physical similarities. And that is a little confusing. It says, so perhaps they imply variation by status, with one graveyard being for the elite and others for workers. This is the earliest such evidence in Egypt. So there are cemeteries, different parts of cemeteries for different people, worker cemeteries. As these sites also shed light on the family structure of the time, the overall sex ratio across all cemeteries is 3 women to each man, which may indicate polygamy. It says, we also believe the attainment of personhood, the age children are socialized into people, was from 3 years, given their inclusion into adult cemeteries. There is also clear evidence of respect for previously buried people by later mourners, resulting in the reusing of the graves to bury their dead. And that seemed to be something that was common all the way through the period in this land. Older graves were reused, and sacred sites were built upon to be sacred sites. It says, when coming across old skeletons, they often carefully reposition the bones of these ancestors. In some interesting cases, they even made attempts to reconstruct the skeletons by replacing teeth that had fallen out back into the skeleton, and not always correctly. It says, these behavioral indicators, together with the seemingly innovative technological and ceremonial architecture mentioned earlier, such as the calendar circles and shrines, imply the level of sophistication well beyond that of simple herders. Taken together, the findings provide a glimpse of things yet to come in ancient Egypt. A key component of our work involves the conservation of Egyptian heritage. We found no evidence of grave looting, unlike sites in the Nile Valley. The last people to touch the Neolithic material at Gebel, Ramlah, lived during that time. However, wind-related erosion has reached a point where once buried remains lie on or near the surface. The pace of destruction has increased significantly since 2001. Once exposed, the context of these sites can be lost, and organic material can get sandblasted to bits. This means that if we hadn't discovered these remains when we did, they would have been soon lost forever. For that reason, we and the SCA have decided that, when we have studied our material, all will be reburied on site to hopefully survive for thousands of more years. So that's a report that came out a week ago on burials and other things that stretch back thousands of years before the recognized start of dynastic Egypt. This is physics.org, and I will leave the link below. Hope you thought that was interesting, and you all have a very nice day.